When it comes to the NBA, one thing I always love seeing is who current players, past players, pick as the greatest player in NBA history. And really breaking down their top 5 lists, top 10 lists, I always love doing that. Now, for most players, not all of them, but in the modern era, most players don't really care much about NBA history, as these guys were born in the late 90s, early 2000s, and couldn't care less about it. And looking at one of the bona fide superstars of today, you have Luka Doncic, at worst a top 5, top 7 player, give his take on the greatest player in NBA history. And for Luka, there was zero hesitation, zero question, Michael Jordan still is the greatest ever. So of course, seeing one of the best players in the game say Michael Jordan is the greatest, that's great to see. But also the cherry on top, it is pretty widely known Luka is a massive LeBron James fan whose overall game is influenced off LeBron's passing and his great scoring. And Luka, like most young superstars, he's only 24 years old and was born in 1999. Meaning for MJ's career, Luka would have been, 3 or 4 when he was on the Wizards? So really Luka Doncic has no recollection, no memory of Michael Jordan the player. And I think that's fine. And actually, it's kind of a strong point in Jordan's favor as the greatest, as even players, fans who didn't witness him play directly still pick him overwhelmingly as the greatest of all time. And I think for any objective fan who knows NBA history, knows how to evaluate legacies, evaluate play, Michael Jordan at the worst is probably top 2. I mean, you can make a very thinly veiled case Kareem is ahead of Jordan based off longevity, but there's a lot of holes in that argument I would really have a problem with. And one thing I remember pretty vividly, about 4 to 5 years ago on ESPN, they had this reporter named Baxter Holmes, who actually interviewed Jordan, spent time with him at his house. He said he believes Michael Jordan's legacy over time will erode like everything. Now look, I agree with that ever so slightly, because of course in the end, time will win. But for Michael Jordan right now in 2023, really going to the 2030s, 2040s, he's still highly relevant in today's culture. As 20 years after he retired, he is still by far the most popular NBA player alive, sells more shoes than the top players combined, and his Last Dance documentary was kind of a refresher to everyone of how great he truly was, and an introduction to how great he was to younger fans and younger players. Now speaking of the players, the average age of an NBA player is just over 26 years old. Meaning these guys' birthdays, it's around 97, 98, 99 at the latest. Most of those guys, if not all of them, were in diapers when MJ was on the Bulls. But despite that fact, the NBA being so young, an overwhelming 58% of players pick Jordan as the greatest of all time. Pretty shocking and pretty telling. And for even more context, LeBron currently is the oldest player in the NBA, pushing 40. And when he was born was 1984 when MJ was a rookie. Meaning LeBron James wasn't even 10 years old when MJ had three-peated for the first time. And like I said earlier, most of these players, not seeing Jordan play and still picking him over LeBron James is pretty telling and a big feather in Jordan's cap. Now, when it comes to legacy talk, who's the greatest, who's the best, on NBA shows nowadays, that's all the craze. And over the past decade, you really seen a divide in the media. You're either pro LeBron James, pro Lakers, or the opposite, or anti-Lakers. And from my perspective on this, when it comes to LeBron media versus the anti-LeBron media, it's almost like the pro-LeBron media is always on offense, always attacking, and always pushing some agenda. And someone like me, you're kind of on your back foot, pushing back against this stuff, not really wanting to talk about LeBron James, but kind of being forced to because of all the hot takes and utter nonsense. As looking at someone like Nick Wright, the agendas this guy pushes, the takes he has, Clutch Sports has to be paying this guy under the table. It's the only explanation for his awful takes. As he'll go far enough as saying Michael Jordan's legacy as an owner with the Hornets actually impacts his legacy as a player on the Bulls and the Wizards. That's how bad these takes are, and how disingenuous he can be. And one of those takes that went under the radar, it was one of the most disingenuous things I've ever seen, and was just oozing with half-truths and double standards. As Nick Wright in this tweet and this video says that Michael Jordan fans, the Michael Jordan media, they change the quote-unquote math on stuff in service of Jordan. And that by their logic, losing early in the playoffs is actually better than losing in the finals. And he goes on to say, if you think being 4-0 in the finals is better than 4-6, I don't understand your logic. Now, Nick Wright, as smug as ever, right here is telling some truths, making some sense, but at the end ruins it all. Let me explain. If you frame this argument as a Michael Jordan argument versus LeBron James, at the very end, you can't say, well, these people think being 4-0 is better than 4-6. They're dumb. First off, Michael Jordan is 6-0 in the finals, and nobody's arguing 4-0 is better than 4-6. What we're arguing, what we're correct about, is being 6-0 in the finals is better than 4-6. And of course, it is. But you see, Nick Wright, he knows that. So he can't say 6-0 is better than 4-6, because by default, he's saying Jordan is the greater and better overall player. And like most things with players, it does require a lot of context. For example, if you have a super team, you make the Eastern Conference Finals, and you lose. That is infinitely worse than a player who takes a team that's a 6 seed and gets them to the East Finals, but also loses. Things like being 6-0, 4-6, it's a pretty good bedrock and a starting point for an NBA debate. But once you go past that, things are very, very nuanced. And of course, championships, they do matter, but the context behind them is also super, super important. And I think for someone like Nick Wright, you can agree with him on some things, like yes, making the finals, losing the finals, is better than losing the first round, the second round, or the conference finals. We can agree on that. But past that, the way this guy twists the truth, bends logic, it's a desperate attempt to push a narrative that many fans reject. And my overall point is pretty simple. Guys like Nick Wright, Shannon Sharpe, the Kendrick Perkins of the world, the narratives they push in the media, they're so absurd, so outlandish, fans by default have to push back on them and call them out on their nonsense. And when it happens day after day after day after day, and it's being forced constantly, you're going to have a lot of fans, a lot of players who reject LeBron James being the greatest because you're pushing so damn hard. And going full circle with this video, looking back at younger NBA players who still pick Jordan as the greatest, it goes to show the media's overall influence, it really isn't as strong as you would think. As people like Rich Paul, Clutch Sports, ESPN, even Fox Sports, millions of dollars, if not billions. You can't dethrone Michael Jordan through slimy tactics and false narratives. As Jordan, much like a Babe Ruth, a Tom Brady, they're iconic figures who only be dethroned by an actual player who's greater than them. And once again, seeing someone like Luka Doncic, an admitted LeBron fan who grew up in LeBron's era, him picking Jordan over LeBron speaks volumes. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.